Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs around the internet, many podcasts around the internet as well, including websites like Cover 32 and Cold Omaha. Please welcome Arif Hassan. Arif, how are you doing this Thursday evening?
Drained. I've done way too much walking, which A, tells you about my lack of physical fitness, but B, tells you I've been to the Mall of America.
You have been wasted away again in Margaritaville, which is located at E344.
The directories have improved since the last time I've been there. They give you a little walking guy map, which is actually, it's kind of cool. The guy walks around, he gets onto the elevator or whatever. I don't know why he never gets on escalators, but he gets onto the elevator.
Escalator is just too much for him. It's like the dog who tries to sit up in the back seat of the car. Like, nope, this is not cool. This is not good. I will do the stairs with you though.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of touchscreen electronic directories, so long as there is a hand sanitizer situation kind of resolved nearby.
Be like, I'll touch it, but I better be able to disinfect myself immediately.
Yeah, I don't trust people.
No, you shouldn't. I was once incredibly lucky going into Mall of America because I wanted to get my son a small Vikings hat because I am trying to raise my son to be as disappointed in life as I am. So, but I was incredibly lucky because I accidentally parked in the exact right spot and walked all of 20 feet into the store. It was I was in and out of Mall of America in 10 minutes. It was in less than 10 minutes, like 6 minutes. It was the most amazing accomplishment of my adult life. Kid being
That's
born.
Unicorn level rare. Relish that moment.
Oh God, yeah. We made it back to the car. It was my brother and I were we're not talking about what happened here because no one is going to be able to believe us. It was the equivalent of getting picked up by a UFO and then getting dropped back off. You're no one is ever going to believe that we got in and out of Mall of America in 6 minutes.
The last couple of times I've been in the Mall of America for a non-Vikings related thing, I've needed to purchase something pretty specific, and I was well, I happen to be near the largest shopping center in the contiguous United States or whatever. Surely they have it. And either it's just way too far away and only one store has it, like an ice scraper. I was looking for an ice scraper actually yesterday because I'm borrowing my girlfriend's mom's car because my girlfriend's car is broken down and it doesn't have an ice scraper in it. So we had to get one. And it was I walk in and I asked one of the many security guards, hey, is there a store here that sells ice scrapers? And they're I don't think so. Which is just a weird thing to say off the bat. My first response would be, well, surely, but I couldn't direct you.
So you treated the security guy like the greeter at Walmart. You're hey, where do y'all got the ice scrapers at? And the security guard just looks at you. Why would you go to Build-A-Bear? Why would I care? Why?
Yeah, right. So I'm going store to store, basically asking people, and it wasn't until the person at Sealand or whatever directed me to the Holiday Station store.
Oh, yeah.
On the exact opposite side of Sealand. So I had to cut through Nickelodeon Universe or whatever, which was difficult because they were throwing a Super Bowl party that I actually was not interested in being a part of. I went all the way to the Holiday Station store. I go inside. I'm looking around and I can't find it. And I'm I'm in the automotive section. What is it? So I have to ask one of them where it is. And he's oh, yeah, you have to turn a corner here into this tiny niche where all the ice scrapers are. I was just really? I found the one store and it's not even and it's that all the time. I never find anything I friggin' need there. There's 8 Minnesota memorabilia stores that I don't care about because I live here.
We had to. I was back when I lived down there, and I was dating this girl. We went to MOA because one of my better friends was it's a step below executive chef. It might have been sous chef, but he was the co-executive chef for this high end restaurant in MOA that's since closed. But he told us, if you guys want to come down, we need to give away X number of meals per month, and if you guys want to come in, we'll cook whatever the hell you want. So like, great, and it's New Year's. So we thought it's New Year's Eve, the mall should be empty. We were wrong.
It was a terrible miscalculation on your part.
we were horribly wrong. It was in the evening too. It was like 7 or 8. So we're like,
oh, so like it was too early for like an actual New Year's celebration party, but like too late. Wow.
But we thought it was going to be too late for it, but or too early for a party. But all of these, like, there was a big thing at the Nickelodeon universe of all of these kids and their parents like celebrating, like all like just. There was like 3,000 kids just hanging out and singing and dancing and partying. It's like, and the problem was, in order to get to his restaurant, we had to cut through. Like, this was the best part, and we're just sitting behind all of these people, just going, so this is it. This is where they're gonna find us. Just when I do eventually die, just find some way of making it so that my body has some sort of dignified look to it. Not this huddled over for warmth crap. Just something nice and dignified when I'm, found like a guy on the side of Mount Everest.
Right. I would imagine if civilization had collapsed just then, it would have been very embarrassing for you.
Like, wow, this is. He did what with his life, and this is where he was found? There would be a lot more questions than answers, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So, welcome to this week's show. Now that we've decided to go and talk about MOA for a bit, we have a few things to talk about. We have, obviously, the Super Bowl is going to be happening on Sunday. We'll be talking a little bit about the game, more so talking about everything that's happening in Minneapolis. This is more for the benefit of those who are outside of the Twin Cities and are not, Airbnb-ing their homes. And then we'll be talking about the offensive coordinator situation as well, the wonderful quarterback situation we have found ourselves in, lots of situations, and a little bit about the Senior Bowl. But before we get to any of that, just a couple of things to talk about. We are supported by you guys. This is a show that does not have ads. We listen to you guys. We get money from you guys to keep the lights on, and we appreciate everything you've done over the past several years to help us keep going. Everything you've done in the way of just sharing a tweet, sharing the links on Facebook or Reddit. I found a Reddit thread the other day of the 2009 game that Arif and I did, and again, it is the most feedback we've ever gotten on an episode. Like, people seem to enjoy it if they gave it a shot, but those who did not want to listen to it were very vocal as to why they would not want to care about it. But everything you guys have done, we really appreciate it, especially those who have gone the extra mile and decided to throw a little bit of money at us to keep the lights on. So again, thank you guys so much. I have a couple of donations to get through, and also a quick note, we have sent out the newspapers. We had our little drawing. We did send out our 3 newspapers, and everyone has been contacted who has won those. So again, thank you guys so much for taking part in that. We really do appreciate it. Our first donation is via Patreon from Kenny Hoshin. And again, if I'm going to destroy your name, send us something at norsecodepodcast@gmail.com, and I will do my best to not slaughter your name. But it appears Kenny Hoshin has sent us something via Patreon. Again, thank you, Kenny, so much. We also have 2 Patreon or two PayPal notes rather. Jason Tyvade via PayPal, who says, "Love the show and all that you do. R.I.P. to Dusty." Quick note: Dusty is not dead.
I mean, as far as we know, I guess.
No, I've spoken to him this afternoon. Dusty is alive. Dusty is well.
A lot of things can happen between an afternoon and an evening, James.
I'm fully well aware that of all the crazy things that can happen to Dusty. Dusty's a bit like, and I don't know if you've watched BoJack Horseman, but he's a bit like the roommate in BoJack Horseman. He just kind of finds himself into situations, so it's possible. Also, just a quick note, because I've had a few people who've actually gone as far as to question if he is okay, mentally or whatever, like actually concerned about his welfare. Dusty is fine. Dusty is okay.
Wait. Is he fine, or is he like fine?
He is the non-sarcastic version of fine.
Okay, good.
Which is hard to believe because Dusty being such a sarcastic person. But no, Dusty is okay. I've spoken to him several times, including a couple times today. He's fine. So for those that have been curious and have mentioned it, he's okay. John Thien also donates, and this was great. After hearing 3 previous contributions from Austria, I figured it was time for me to man up and send you some money. You know what? That is the best way to donate, is just through peer pressure. We appreciate that.
I also like the idea that we're getting an Austria chain going. Send us all your donations, Austria.
This is great. Anyone else who's holding out in Austria, I'm just saying we've gotten 4. We've received 4 donations from you. I figured it was time for me to man up and send you some money. We've been watching all the Vikings games from Innsbruck, Austria, for 9 years now. Noon games are the best. We sit down and watch dinner and go to bed after the game. My wife and 2 daughters finally made the trip to London this year and got to see the Vikings play live. He's originally from White Bear, New York, and can remember the last 3 Super Bowl losses. That's too bad. We had a lot of fun watching this evening, but we're hugely disappointed after staying up until 3:30 Monday morning. Damn.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, still fun to watch. So, Skull Vikings, and he says, let me know if you want to know more about the Austrian American football scene. We could probably do a show on location at this point in Austria. We'd probably have a few houses to
we'd have a potential array of host options.
Mm-hmm. This works for me. So again, thank you guys so much for donating. If you would like to donate to the show, if you hear value in the episodes that we provide, you can do so at patreon.com/Norse Code, which is a sustaining membership. You can also go to paypal.me/Norse Code, and you can donate through there. So that is just a one-time donation there. It goes right to us. Again, any amount that you would like to send our way, we definitely appreciate it. Whether it's $1, $2, tree fitty, $5 does get you the Norse Code bumper sticker. So again, thanks for that. So I haven't lived in Minneapolis in a few years, but I remember the 2008 Republican National Convention and the waves of tear gas coming up University Avenue in St. Paul. What is the police presence like in Minneapolis this week?
Actually, Eric Thompson would be a better person to ask, even though he doesn't live in Minneapolis and I do, because it's all downtown and I have refused to go downtown. I've been to the Mall of America, which for people not familiar with the layout of the Twin Cities is not in the Twin Cities.
No, that is yeah. Like if you think of St. Paul and Minneapolis as a straight line, if you go down in the middle of that straight line, you hit Bloomington.
Right. Yeah. And so I've been there catching up with a bunch of national media types that I've interacted with on Twitter, but never met in person, and so on. I've kind of avoided downtown, but people I've talked to have talked about how it's quite militarized, I would imagine. So I talked to a protester who's going to protest the Super Bowl this weekend and protested the 2008 Republican National Convention, which, with one comes the other, I suppose. And they mentioned that the police militarization at the 2008 Republican National Convention was to a greater degree and probably to a greater density. But there's probably more material and people just out and about around Minneapolis related to police. And they've got military vehicles of some sort. They refer to them as tanks. I'm not quite sure that specific terminology is accurate. I feel like
it might actually be it might be a tank, or just
it could
the
be
urbanized version of smaller suitcase ones.
Right. Yeah. A suitcase tank. But yeah, so it's evidently quite heavy, but I've not been downtown. It's not interesting to me.
No, I remember the 2009 Republican National Convention and going to the Rage Against the Machine concert at the Target Center that Thursday night, I want to say, right before the convention wrapped up, and seeing 3 deep in riot, 3 or 5 deep in riot gear surrounding the building. And and like squadrons of bike cops and like literal like Gatling guns with sandbags driving around the downtown area, like open. So you have like a Gatling gun and a cop in there, and just like some of the crazier stuff that we later saw in police situations in Missouri, but just crazy stuff. So I'm like watching all this and going, wow. I'm kind of glad I'm missing some of this. Minneapolis is finally getting all of the problems that St. Paul got in 2008 for the RNC. So have fun and enjoy. But so you've spent some time at MOA. We did get a question about if you're going to be doing any more podcasts with additional folks moving forward now that you've got to meet all of these cool people that have been interviewing you.
I've not pitched them a podcast spot in North Dakota. I don't think I've met someone deserving enough yet.
Is that it?
Yeah, I talked to Paul Allen. He was like, "Hey, Arif, can I please come onto your show?" I was like, "No, Paul, sorry, I don't think you're like not really a programmatic fit." That's a story that definitely happened for sure, 100% really.
Absolutely. Just don't at him about this.
Yeah, right.
You don't want to at celebrities, so like let's not bring Paul Allen.
That would be
into
uncomfortable.
This.
You don't. He has to save face. You don't want to make him lie. That sort of thing.
Exactly. Or Wabi, but for totally different reasons.
Right. No. It's. I haven't actually jumped on any podcast there. I had to actually turn one down because of time constraints. But it's. I don't know. It was fun.
So we've got a couple of things to talk about as far as, I guess as far as the game is concerned, or not necessarily as the game is concerned, but just how everything is being laid out. Do you feel like Minneapolis is actually able to sustain all of this traffic in the way that things are kind of being stretched thin right now?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think the city infrastructure is like built for this many people in particular areas. But with and this is like something that the protesters are protesting about, but with cordoning off large sections of the city from people who like go to work and stuff, and like need to use mass transit to get to work. They have relieved a lot of the potential congestion. So I think it'll probably, be fine for the fan or whatever. But it's been frustrating all week for people who like work at the IDS tower and stuff.
Yeah. It's funny looking at some of the stuff happening in downtown and some of the coverage that's been going on through, say, like the Dan Patrick Show or NBC or ESPN or NFL Network. I'm reminded of a really odd situation in that I used to work in downtown, and I used to work down on Chicago, kitty corner to HCMC. So there was this dialysis clinic I used to work at, and it was in this weird like office building that was kitty corner to HCMC, and it had a parking ramp inside of it. See, it's the only like piece of like real note there, but in addition to the dialysis clinic and a few other random clinics that were in this building, there was an abortion clinic inside of it. And for those, like, I went to college after trigger warnings became a thing, but this isn't a story about abortion. This is a story about a protester. And this protester used to hang out outside of the building every day. This I assume this was her job. She just hung out every day and wouldn't recognize you. Like she and I talked numerous times. She would not recognize me or my car, especially after I would show her I don't work for that clinic. I work for the blood cleaning place, the place that's keeping people alive. here's my pass. See, I'm fine. And
I work at the place where they use the machine that replaces kidneys, which is amazing. But just wave your sign at me or whatever.
Yeah, I'm working IT. Please ignore me.
Yeah, right.
So, but every day would just be screaming at my car about how I'm doing all of these terrible things to children, and you can listen to
I
that.
like the idea of you rolling down the window of your car every day and like patiently explaining, "No, I don't work in the dialysis machine.
I work in the place that saves people's lives. Like this building isn't just one big excuse for that. No, so
it's mostly a parking garage.
It's actually mostly a parking garage." I wonder how she's doing with all of this, because I can only imagine the traffic on Chicago is dead, or it's been all walled off for those who aren't going to HCMC. Funny story before we kind of stop this. I hit her with my car once.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, it wasn't intentional. She
was this just in. James does not believe in free speech.
This was not that situation at all. If anything, she dove onto the car. So she was hanging out.
He ran into my fist, officer.
Exactly. So she was hanging out by the entrance of the parking ramp. And in order to get in, you had to either push the button to get your ticket, or you had to flash your fob, and it would beep and it would raise up. And she was literally running across like a dumb squirrel. She was running across the area that would come up every time a car would come on, and would like try to, when your thing went down, when your window went down, she'd try to throw a bunch of pamphlets into your car.
Amazing.
Every time. So eventually it was my turn, and I went up, and she mistimed it and ended up on the hood of my car. And like she rolled up. She like hit her like at a decent speed too. Like she rolled up. She rolled up.
Like
the
you
hood.
say, decent speed. Like this is like a goal. Like
Well, I didn't idle. Fastball. I didn't idle up. I took the right and I went in, and she decided to meet my windshield wiper. And so she got down, and I leaned out the window. It's like, "You okay?" And she just kind of like groaned for a moment. So you have that moment of like, do I get out of the car?
I've got some good news if I happen to have accidentally hit your kidney. Yeah. But otherwise.
I was like, you all right? Because I think I'm okay. I was like, okay, good. There's actually a clinic like a block and a half away over on this side. If you're probably familiar with it, but if you go over here, you're probably fine. And just got in. I was like, if you do that enough times, it's your own fault for getting hit. But right. I feel bad for her because I want to believe that she's just totally just ruined by the fact that there's just no traffic over on Chicago. How is she going to get to work? I assume that's her work.
I mean, she seems like the kind of person who would like hoof it as far as possible. Like
endeavor to persevere.
Here, might as well just walk.
Endeavor to persevere. So let's talk about Vikings news before we talk about anything involving the Super Bowl. We still do not have an offensive coordinator. We actually delayed recording this episode because we thought that the Vikings would announce this week, and they will not be. So we still have no offensive coordinator. What are you thinking about the possibilities? And we got a little bit of offensive coordinator stuff in the mailbag, but what are you hearing about the offensive coordinator situation?
Yeah, so the people I've been talking to about it are all people who are like connected to somebody and not the somebody themselves. So I have no like sources. I just have friends who have sources, which is very unreliable, obviously. But the mood around the people I've been talking to is that the Vikings were really gunning for John DeFilippo, which I think is how you pronounce his name. DeFilippo, I don't know. But the quarterback's coach for the Eagles, former quarterback's coach for the Browns, got offered head coaching positions, or actually interviewed for head coaching positions, didn't get offered, interviewed for head coaching positions after being the quarterback's coach for the Browns, and then moves to be the quarterback's coach of the Eagles. Obviously, we saw the excellent work he did with Carson Wentz, a bad quarterback that became good because of him and only him. And of course Foles is doing well again under his tutelage too. That doesn't mean everything. I mean, like part of the appeal of like Brad Childress, for example, is that he helped develop quarterbacks for Andy Reid because Andy Reid called the plays and stuff like that. Brad Childress turned out to be not a great play caller or head coach or whatever. So, you take everything with a grain of salt, but it sounds like that's the person they're gunning for, and that's why they would have delayed an announcement. And of course, he's he's free to decline, and there's, potentially reasons that he could decline. Maybe he doesn't think the Vikings offensive coordinating job is great. Maybe, he doesn't think he'd be able to develop the staff or bring on the staff that he wants to. Maybe, he doesn't want to have, maybe Stefanski is his quarterback coach and, Kennedy Polamalu is his running backs coach and whatever. Maybe that's part of the deal. Maybe it's not as open an offensive coordinating position as possible. So even though the Vikings are waiting, and even though it'd be a promotion for him and he'd get to call plays and stuff like that, you could say no for a lot of legitimate reasons, but they want to give him the opportunity. And so that's why they're waiting until after the Super Bowl. I think he's their top priority. That doesn't mean they're offering to. I think that these interviews are genuine. They're trying to figure out who they want to hire. They want to have as wide a pool as possible. And so he's in that pool along with, Sean Ryan and Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Campbell, something like that. So yeah. And Darrell Bevel, who also interviewed.
Yes.
Quarterbacks coach getting promoted to offensive coordinator. There's actually, I used to look into, people's history and the coaching tree and, where they learned offenses. And that actually did used to be helpful. People brought the offenses that they kind of grew up in coaching, but now it's just not a thing. Maybe we'll learn about terminology. I don't think we'll learn a lot about the offense from the offenses that they were a quarterback's coach for. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what the Vikings are looking for in an offensive coordinator based off of who they've talked to, although I guess there's a thread of West Coast-ish people that are familiar with West Coast systems. But I mean, Stefanski's been an assistant coach under every kind of offense, for example. Sean Ryan doesn't come from a West Coast system. At least recently. So, they're not even looking for a particular system fit or anything like that. So, I think it's likely that they're gunning for DeFilippo, but I don't think I think these interviews are genuine, so I don't think they've got anyone solidly in mind.
No. It's interesting that not a lot has leaked out about it. So and the fact that it's a little bit later in the process. Most of the bigger names have all been signed, and even Jim Bob Cooter, for example, has just agreed to be back for offensive coordinator for the Lions.
Just wanted to say his name.
It's a fun name to say. Why you gotta hate?
Even the big names like Jim Bob Cooter, which is a big name because it has a lot of letters, has re-signed with the Detroit Lions.
It's a Jim Bob. I mean, what do you got against? I'd say what do you got against Jim Bobs, but I don't want to get into that. So, but it's late in the game. So it's I'm not saying that the pickings are slim. I am saying that most of the sexy names have since been signed or have moved on with new coaches to different areas. So.
And I'm okay with that. The sexy names were actually not all that appealing. Mike McCoy, for example, was whatever. So I'm glad that he's moved on. I'm kind of interested in the idea of new blood.
Jeff Fisher's still available.
That is technically true. He's a defensive coach and also bad.
But there's no but. He could bring us to glory by showing up for a season and then leaving, and then everyone kind of doing the whole Ewing effect thing, where once he's gone.
The trial by fire Jeff Fisher, and then so you can just bring in any three quarterbacks and then trade with them and say, hey, they've been through the Jeff Fisher, crucible, and
there's
trade them first-round picks.
2 first-round picks right off the bat.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Hiring Jeff Fisher would be an investment in future first-round picks.
I'm starting to be more on board with this. Speaking of terrible life choices, let's talk about the quarterback situation and what Washington decided to do with their future. So Washington has decided that they no longer need the services of Kirk Cousins. They need the services of Alex Smith, who has been described as an older version of Kirk Cousins, and have signed and are planning on giving him a 4-year extension because that's what you do. And they've also traded away I would argue, their best defensive player, which is their corner. Who, right? So man, you felt bad for him on Twitter. You felt bad. God.
So it was
I'm not
announced that it was going to
traded.
be a player, and he was like, "It's not me. I'm safe. They love me." And he's right. They did. He was, according to multiple defensive players on the team, the highest graded defensive player internally among their coaches. And he was like, "No, I'm safe. They love me. It's fine."
I'm not traded, guys. I'm really not.
And then, like 30 minutes after he tweeted that, it was announced it was him, and it's just like, buddy. But he took it on the chin pretty well.
Yeah.
Like he tweeted out like the Homer Simpson gift. That was good. That was a good response.
That was very appropriate. You felt bad for him, but so as a result, Alex Smith, who a lot of people were calling for him to appear in purple for the Vikings, Alex Smith will not be an option, and Kirk Cousins, who I've always thought would be a perfect fit in Denver, it's now come out that Denver is trying to sign him. So,
weird.
I know. What do we make of the quarterback situation that seems to be appearing around the league, and the desire for because when you looked at the Alex Smith situation, that just reeked of the Donovan McNabb thing to me. Like maybe a year away from the Donovan McNabb, but it was still older quarterback, was good. Trying to, it seemed like a very Vikings thing to do. Just get him on the very end of his career.
Right. And I don't think Alex Smith, would have, fallen off quite to the degree that McNabb apparently had by the time the Vikings signed him.
Yeah, or as quickly.
Right. But yeah, no, it's very like the Vikings have historically done this, like, with was it Randall Cunningham and Brett Favre, and it's just like, I mean, sometimes that works. Warren Moon, but a lot of times it's just like, what do you do? You got the wrong Brad Johnson, and like, and it's like, old Rich Gannon, but not even MVP Rich Gannon. No. Like, what is happening? It would feel very Vikings for that to happen, and that would suck. I think that, so my read on this is that the Vikings are absolutely aware of and or considering and trying to figure out kind of what they think they would be willing to part with in terms of a market price for someone like Kirk Cousins or Tyrod Taylor. But I think all of those are secondary to trying to kind of clean things up in-house. And I think that based off of what I've heard, that the Vikings are very much prioritizing Teddy Bridgewater, which I don't want to put out there as a report, because it's not, I haven't confirmed it with like multiple sources. This is, again, a friend of a source kind of thing. Like, it's not, I haven't heard. So I want to make that clear that it's not, I'm not reporting that the Vikings are re-signing Teddy Bridgewater. The rumor, the feeling in the air is that that's the focus. And I believe that. I agree with that likelihood. And I also believe that the Vikings don't think that that's a 100% chance thing. It never is. And so they probably have pro scouts already kind of trying to figure out sort of what the deal with Kirk Cousins is, or Tyrod Taylor, whatever, and figuring out what they think an appropriate market value for those quarterbacks is, and whether or not they'd be willing to pay up for that. So yeah, of course they're considering Kirk Cousins, but I don't think that that's what their plan is. I think the plan is to find some way to get Teddy. So there's been a lot of talk about tolling today. Anyone who read, I think it was an article I wrote in September, could have seen this coming. I don't actually. So people think that I promote my articles when I'm right and like dunk on people. And no, I just dunk on people when they make bad arguments. I actually do not very often like retweet my articles when it's proven that I'm like right. Like I haven't like referenced that, at least on Twitter anyway. I haven't referenced that like Case Keenum piece about how he's going to fall off.
No, you just let everyone else on Twitter do it for you.
Right. And I'm totally okay. Like, yeah, you remember this piece I wrote? You say I'm right. I'm not going to disagree. I think I'm right, too. But it's just, it would be weird for me to be like, told you. And so I don't usually do that. But I do remember being in arguments about this way back in like September, when I was like, hey, I still think Teddy's contract could toll based on the language in the CBA. And now people are talking about it. And it's like, yeah, of course. Why do you think the NFLPA thought they had a case? And bloggers and Redditors that I respect, like, Chris Gates, Daily Norseman, he mentioned that he doesn't think the NFLPA has a leg to stand on. And I think that the wording of the CBA at first glance absolutely looks like that. It's like very ambiguously worded. It's poorly written. There's 800 lawyers and they couldn't figure this part out. Or they didn't see this coming, I should say. 800 lawyers not figuring something out is not interesting, but 800 lawyers not seeing this coming is. And so the language of the CBA, physically, unable to perform, I think, football services or engage in football activities, is different than being on the physically unable to perform list. And so the question is whether or not Teddy Bridgewater was physically able to perform football services, but was required by bylaws not to be able to perform them on the field, right? And so whether or not he's medically cleared to play. The NFLPA says they have medical records that they're going to be using to marshaling this argument that Teddy Bridgewater's contract cannot be told. If he's told, that means his base salary is $1.3 million next year, and I think his cap is probably $2 million. I don't know how the proration of that signing bonus works out, but let's say it's $2 million. I think a fair market offer for Teddy Bridgewater, given that he was essentially benched for Sam Bradford for the final 2 playoff games, and threw 2 passes, both incomplete. Yeah, drops, fine, 1 interception. I think a fair market would be below $6 million. So I had heard for a while that it sounds like they weren't going to toll him out of respect for him. And then over the past week, I've heard rumors have been flying that they actually were going to toll him. They even already submitted the paperwork, which is interesting because the language in the CBA is it automatically tolls. But no, actually, the Vikings need to request it or whatever. And then now I've been hearing rumors that they're not going to toll him because they don't want to go through this headache of a fight with the NFLPA, which is abstractly that makes sense, right? I don't want to deal with this sort of thing, but that's a $10 million difference potentially because, and again, rumors from people who may have sources that they have not confirmed with, they may actually pay him more than that $6 million, which I think would be surprising, more power to Teddy, but a remarkably inefficient move from the Vikings if that's the case. Still, obviously, whatever it is, $10 million less than signing Keenum, right? But yeah, that would be really surprising if they, for example, decided to pay him essentially the 5th-year option or something. So yeah, all of the rumors have been some version of they're keeping Teddy, but different strategies by which they do it. And so I think by reading into those, the 3 changing versions of the ways that they'll try to keep Teddy, you can basically see, oh, they're trying to keep Teddy. So I think that's a part of the plan. Now, whether or not that means they, draft a quarterback in the 3rd round or the 4th round or the 2nd round, that would change things, right?
Or have a QB competition in camp with Kyle Sloter.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, in open competition with Dusty's favorite quarterback.
And Don from Ohio, apparently.
And Don from Ohio. Possible. I don't think that they're going to just give Teddy the thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went with a 4-quarterback strategy in camp, which is something I've kind of actually advocated as a thing I think they should do. Draft a mid-round quarterback. The mid-round quarterbacks this year in the draft are not as great as they've been in previous years. And that's, kind of excluding the fact that Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, and Dak Prescott have kind of overperformed as mid-round quarterbacks. But as prospects, they were all more interesting than Ben Kurt from Virginia, a name I did not make up. And also I would be kind of upset if the Vikings drafted. Yeah, but still, I think, they draft maybe a mid-round quarterback. They only have 5 picks. I think they have to trade down to get another pick. But potentially draft a mid-round quarterback, sign a veteran like a Chase Daniel or a Josh McCown, and then just have an open competition. The first part of the open competition will happen before training camp. 2 people will likely separate themselves out of the 4 as the most likely to be deserving. And then in training camp, you can have that competition, and we can argue until our face is blue that actually, it should be Josh McCown who starts and not Kyle Sloter, who should be number 2, and Teddy cut him. We could argue about that, right? But it's I think that's what it's likely to be. I think that they're just going to let Keenum seek his fortune and just be rich.
That's not a bad solution to the situation, but it's still hard to say goodbye to somebody who brought you to the NFC Championship game, regardless of the fact that it feels like, and from the sound of it, from Mike Zimmer, that they were pretty much you could argue they overplayed their hand, but they were pot committed at that point.
They were, and I mean, like Joe Buck, who every time someone mentions his name, like the Vikings fandom groans. I thought he called a phenomenal game against for the Vikings against the Saints. Mentioned that like throughout the year, you've been kind of getting like these weird indications that like Zimmer is not playing Keenum out of obligation, but like playing Keenum against some versions of his better judgment, like like the heart says yes, head says no kind of thing. Where he's like Zimmer said, like he's got a horseshoe around his neck, which happened I think in November. He said something like that. Keenum's got a horseshoe around his neck, and and like stuff like that. And the thing that they said, like if they get down like by 10 points, Keenum might be pulled for Bradford. Like that's not something you say about like a dude that you're going to pay $23 million for next year.
No,
right?
he's gonna make a bunch of money for the Jets. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, the Jets would be a team that would do that. I wouldn't wish that on Keenum because he seems like not just like I don't want to say he seems like a great guy because like that's what you say about like people that you don't know, but genuinely seems like a really cool dude. And so like I want him to land in a great situation.
I still think that he's officially on the list of people who should never have to pay for a beer in his life in the city of Minneapolis.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. Like, yeah, I don't want the Vikings to like sign him or whatever, but that's not like he didn't do like amazing things for the team.
No, he should be anytime he hits up the blue door, he should immediately be given fries and a drink. Like you on the house, sir. You're fine.
Right. So yeah. The Jets would totally do that. Jacksonville might do that, and that of course would be an upgrade over Blake Bortles. Who they say they're committed to.
I really want to do the bad QB league next year. Like I really want to bring that. I really want to bring that back. You get X number of points whenever the coach says that they believe in the player.
The vote of confidence.
The vote of confidence, and the vote of confidence in the coach's vote of confidence. The Inception style vote of confidence. That's worth extra points. Yeah. Really want to bring that back. I've talked about it for like 3 years. We really need to bring that back. Jacksonville would be interesting. Arizona would be, I think, Arizona could be a better fit. Adrian Peterson's apparently no longer going to be playing there anymore, but you still have quite a number of great running backs.
Well, it's interesting. I have no idea kind of what Wilkes wants now, because it's like in my head I'm just like, oh yeah, Bruce Arians wants a guy who'll just take risks and Keenum will take Bruce Arians.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like maybe that would be interesting, but like that's kind of like a blank slate to me. Like I know Mike McCoy is the offensive coordinator there, but still it's like kind of a blank slate, but that could be a good fit because I think that defense is like poised to just like break out in kind of the same way the Jacksonville defense did. So yeah, a lot of places Keenum could land. Some places might have a better kind of option for them, like Arizona, but I don't think they have enough cap space, or as much cap space as say like the Jets or the Browns would.
I purposely left off the Browns because I respect the man too much.
I'm sorry,
but the Browns would technically be an option, yes. With their it's 105 million. It's something absurd.
I think it's 90 million, but
I swore I saw it I swore I saw that it was over 100 and just went, oh, I can't.
Jesus. Yeah. Well, it's insane. And they're at risk for not hitting the cash floor. So
yeah.
A lot of people think of it as a cap floor that NFL teams are required to have 89% of their cap committed. And that's not quite the case. They're required over a 4-year period to have 89% of the cap paid out in cash, which means that it's not whatever their cap commitment is. It's how much money has left the organization and gone to players, which are different things. That's going to be difficult. Some people, I remember a while back that people were like, oh yeah, the Raiders and the Browns are going to overspend on free agents because they need to hit the cash floor. Forgetting that, like, if you don't hit the cash floor, the punishment is that you disperse the remainder that it takes to get to the cash floor to the players that have played for your team. So it's like not a real, you don't like lose draft picks. It's not a real punishment.
You're not really punished for it in the traditional sense of the word. Yeah.
Right. Because you're spending the money either way. It's just you don't get to get the players you want, which is a punishment, but it's like, yeah, whatever. But that's like a thing that they have to consider because they're up against it heading into, I think, was it 2018? I think is when they have to, or 2020, sorry. No, it's 2019. It's an unusual year. So 2019 is when they have to hit their 4-year mark. So that's interesting. And maybe they'll pay friggin' $50 million for like Kirk Cousins and it destroys the market.
and Matt Stafford just looks at it and goes, wow, I can't even imagine fleecing a city for that.
Right. That would make that would make the draw plays like Money Fort comics just out of control.
You know the rappers that like pick up stacks of cash as phones? Like, I'm confident that's all Kirk Cousins would do from here on out. Like, he would just eventually get the John Gruden deal from Oakland where he just owns a part of the team.
You're right. Yeah. We're running out of money. Can we just pay you in equity?
I mean, this whole Jimmy Haslam in court thing is probably going to go tits up. Right. So you seem like a nice enough guy. Just don't back up any Mayflower trucks over here and we'll be good.
Yeah, right.
Kirk Cousins, future owner of the Cleveland Browns. That'd be good.
Well, yeah. I would, it could only improve the direction of the franchise, honestly.
Well, after reading some of the transcripts of the Jimmy Haslam trial, boy,
yeah, boy. Yeah, he'd be, not that I know much about Kirk Cousins, but I will venture to say he would be among the least felonious owners. So, congrats.
He's already missing the. He already doesn't have the Wario or Luigi mustache that the Wilfs have. So,
right. So
being brought up on charges in New Jersey, yeah, it'll be fine. Let's talk a little bit about the Senior Bowl since that's where you were last week. Do you have any interesting stories of the Senior Bowl? We don't need to go into super detail because there are at least 5 podcasts that you were on for very long periods of time discussing the Senior Bowl. So if you're interested in Senior Bowl coverage, we have some links in the show notes for you. But anything interesting happen at the Senior Bowl this year? Did a Carson Wentz fan try to punch you out again?
Yeah, not this year. I would say unfortunately, but if it had happened, I would have also said unfortunately it did happen.
Some things you just do for the story, like hit a protester with your car.
Right. No Carson Wentz fisticuffs. I did find out that like Wentz is in fact aware of me, which I think is hilarious.
What?
Yeah.
How you can't gloss over this. What do you know?
I mean, there's not much of a story. Like, apparently, one of the people I was talking to, who is familiar with my takes, was like, "Yeah, I was talking to Carson Wentz, and he asked me, what's the deal with that guy?' And he means me. Why does he hate me so much?" And Carson. Fair question. I actually have no reason to hate you. I just kind of do. You seem like a very good person, like genuinely quite good. But I just have to hate you. It's part of the thing now. It's where we are.
At this point, it's part of the brand.
It's where we are.
Carson, you have like a million things to endorse in the state of North Dakota, including like Shields ads every 30 seconds. But like, right. You understand
Shields,
brand.
Carhartt, John Deere.
Sanford Health, I believe, also in Fargo has signed him to some big thing. Yeah, so it's at this point it's just on brand. But I am incredibly amused that he's asked dude, what's the deal? I wonder if we can reach out and get him on the show. I mean, he's not doing much this week.
That would be a pretty good time.
That would be right up there with the attempt to get Chad Greenway on the show, which we did legitimately attempt.
You did try that.
Yes. that was certainly tried. So if anybody's got any like inside line to Carson Wentz, I don't know if we'll be able to broker a piece or anything, but that would probably be the most listened to episode of Norse Code.
Yeah, it's true. It's the Senior Bowl is always great for like something like that. Like we're like, oh, that's funny. I should file that away for later. I hadn't even considered that as one of the stories I could probably tell from the Senior Bowl. I will say, hopefully neither of them listen to the podcast. We'll find out if they do. So at the Shaquem Griffin presser, so Shaquem Griffin's the linebacker from Central Florida who's missing a hand because I think it's a birth deformity. He is really phenomenal athlete. He's like really fluid, really fast, and he's probably a draftable prospect. I would say in my head he seems like a 5th rounder. But they did a presser because that's an amazing story, and his story had been kind of ramping up in the final weeks of the season as UCF was heading towards their undisputed national championship. At the presser, people were super awkward. Because they like couldn't bring themselves to say like you're missing a hand or like frame their questions like, well, with only one hand. Like they couldn't do that. They had to be like, because of your situation. And it was like, which situation? Like as a national champion, like as an edge rusher, the fact that I switch positions so often, like which situation? Oh, there's a hand. You could have just said that and cleared the confusion.
Like there's this giant elephant in the room that no one wants to acknowledge.
Right. And it's just, it's either they like acknowledge it and like in really like weird ways, or they don't, and it's just like, just say it.
Like, what way do you find yourself? Well, in what way do you see yourself? No. Do you find inspiration from the golf pro in Happy Gilmore? Do you? Is there something that you two share that could? And his response would be what? That we both have a fear of alligators? Like, no,
we're both from Florida. Like,
what is it about you and your situation?
And people would eventually like get around to it, but it created like the most excruciating pressure. And his answers were just phenomenal too. So one person was like, and I actually didn't like this question very much because of the way the guy acted at the end. But the guy asks, do you see yourself as like an inspiration to kids with disabilities? Like box standard question, fine. And he was like, well, it's not a disability unless you let it limit your ability or something like that. Like a great answer, right? So standard question, great answer. And the guy just shouts amen. Like the person who asked the question. I was just like, that's odd. That's really weird and awkward. They just shouted amen at this guy's answer. It's like that happened. Someone asked a question. Do you fit better in a 4-3 or a 3-4 defense because of your hand? Which, like, that was astounding to me. And the fact that Griffin didn't, like, laugh outright at the question, I think is a credit to him.
He should have just thrown, like, a Jason Pierre-Paul, like, action figure at him at that point.
Yeah, right? But yeah, and there were some good questions, too. Like, they talked a lot about his versatility because he, signed up initially to be a safety. They moved him to linebacker and then to edge rusher this final year. Just like never happens from safety to edge rusher. I guess Jamie Collins did that at Southern Miss, but it's like really not a thing. They asked him about, his general like life story with his brother, like Shaquille Griffin, which I think this one's cool. So Shaquille Griffin was like a 4-star recruit. So he's getting recruited from like Ole Miss and LSU and like a bunch of SEC schools. And Shaquille said, if you offer me, you have to offer my twin brother. And and a lot of schools didn't want to do that, so they said no. So that's how they ended up at UCF. And I think that's really cool, that he like gave up, the opportunity to go to like these SEC schools, so that he could make sure that he secured his brother a spot. And UCF, obviously, they like got rewarded handsomely for it and getting a 4-star recruit that ended up getting drafted in the 3rd round of the draft, and also this phenomenal linebacker. So that's cool. There's some stories like that. Some stories that I can't tell, which always happens. I learned so Robert Klemko's publishing like a 10-piece story on Baker Mayfield. I learned some of the details about that. It's a great story. I think part 2 has already been published. So go to MMQB, wherever that is, mmqb.si.com. I don't know, and read about the Baker Mayfield stories because they're really insightful. So I'll say that.
Well, no one tried to fight you, but at least Carson Wentz knows your name.
Yeah.
That's, I want to say small victories, but that's just an odd.
Yeah, it's an odd happenstance, really. So who knows if it's a victory.
So, Arif, what about you and
your adversity?
Your adversity. Do you feel your takes are fueled by this lack of? God, I would have loved. I have to find that presser on YouTube. Like I need that now.
Oh yeah.
I just need to pour that into my veins. So what about your situation?
Wait. Okay, I want to add to this. Okay, so the guy asks, do you fit better in a 4-3 or 3-4 because you only have one hand, but in a more awkward way than even that.
I just imagine a lot of pauses.
Right, yeah. And he goes, well, I fit in whatever defense lets me tackle. Like, pretty standard answer for literally anybody. And so everyone, like, kind of laughed and was like, okay. And then the guy, like, insisted upon it. He's like, but if you had to pick a 3-4 or a 4-3, and it's like, dude, where have you been the last 5 years? There's, like, not a huge difference between the two defenses anymore in the modern NFL. And, like, the guy gave his answer, and like, what did you expect the one hand was like? What did you expect him to like say? Like, it's only one hand. I can't take on guards, so I need some space heaters in front of me. So 3-4, I guess. Like what?
I'm reminded of the Simpsons episode of Who Shot Mr. Burns when they went to a press conference and Waylon Smithers comes out and the guy from the Daily Shopper goes, "Hi, from the Daily Shopper. Who are you? What do you do here?" And then gets knocked over. "Oh, do your research." And then, Kent Brockman goes and asks the actual question. Like, I feel like you don't know who he is. All you knew is that on the index card about this particular player, it said missing a hand.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there were, it was like, thank God that someone was familiar with like the kind of player he was and like started asking questions about playing, because that presser would have just gotten so stale so quickly.
Yeah. It changed it from something sad to basically a Saturday Night Live sketch.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So before we hit the mailbag, there is a game going on this weekend. Sadly, the Vikings are not playing in it.
They're not eligible to play in the Kitten Bowl, James. Nobody's a kitten. Jeez.
I forget. Is there a Puppy Bowl this year too, or is it just the Kitten? Because I saw something on the Kitten Bowl.
Yeah, I saw something on the Kitten Bowl. I don't actually know. There's probably a Puppy Bowl. Is it only at halftime?
No,
on Animal. Like you have to switch over to Animal Planet.
It plays like most of the day. It's glorious.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
and you can like just like adopt one of those puppies, right? Like that's the whole point.
Yeah, you certainly could. They have random cams everywhere. They have more cameras on that field than the XFL did. Like, which is apparently a thing now again. Yay!
Oh yeah, now that we're doing once a week shows, we don't cover like some of the odd stuff that happens at the beginning of the week. Like, the XFL.
The XFL coming back is pretty funny. Look out for Don from Ohio and I's podcast with occasional guest Arif, where we talk about the 3 teams they decided to put into St. Louis.
I saw this.
That'll be a lot of fun.
Before we move on to the big game TM, I saw this tweet that was like really perfect. Like, the XFL of the 1990s, not your dad's XFL. the XFL of 2020, we have targeted your dad with laser-like precision. Like, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Gotta stand for the anthem. No players with any criminal charges whatsoever.
Nope, absolutely none. It is too bad that Mr. Manziel won't be able to find another league to flunk out of, but we're trying anyway. We really are. Well, somebody will find him work anyway. It'll be fine. I'm sure he can just catch on with the Mets. So, yeah, the XFL just I just can't wait for the random cities for that to pop up in. Like, you think Portland's probably going to get a team?
Portland, San Antonio,
St. Louis,
Birmingham.
Yeah.
What random city?
What random city in Florida is going to end up getting it?
Oh,
Key West?
Man. No.
Orlando? Yeah.
Daytona.
Oh God. That'll be a sight. Yeah, they'll do it in Daytona. Apparently, you can play football in soccer stadiums now, as the Chargers are proving. So you can play this one in a parking lot outside of a Piggly Wiggly. It'll be fine.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm just imagining the franchises, but they're not a franchise model because the league's going to own all the teams. But for lack of a better word, franchises.
It's worked out so well for the MLS.
Yeah. Just trying to imagine, because New York probably get a team, Washington probably, Vegas, Vegas
almost certainly.
Well, Vegas had a team, so you kind of have to give Vegas a team again. I think Vegas were the Outlaws.
That sounds suspiciously close to like what the USFL did.
Yeah,
because there was an Outlaws team as well, but I don't think it was Vegas.
Yeah.
Every like tertiary league has an Outlaws, right?
I want to see the XFL Hall of Fame. Like, I want to see first ballot Hall of Famer. He hate me.
Yeah, right. I was just thinking it's one guy, right? It's just
and Maddox. I think Maddox was another guy that you could argue.
Well, I mean, there were better players than He Hate Me, but
that was the most iconic.
But like, yeah,
he's on the Mount Rushmore. He's the only one, but he's on the Mount Rushmore of the XFL.
Right. Isn't that just a statue? No, it's a Mount Rushmore of one guy. It's different.
There are 4 heads, but I only see one. There are 4 heads.
There are 4 heads. I'm sorry, guys. This episode has gone off the rails
a bit. It's not like we're going to the Super Bowl this year, so we're trying to make do with the situation. We kind of lost it after last week, so it's this or nothing. So you're getting a show, darn it. Let's talk a bit about the Super Bowl. Obviously, the Eagles' defense is very impressive. Tom Brady is still Tom Brady, and the New England defense is in a bend but not break mode. And then you have the offense of Nick Foles. Now, the thing the Vikings didn't count on is Nick Foles playing the game of his life. What are the odds that Nick Foles can play the game of his life part 2 against the Patriots?
Yeah, against Belichick? Friggin' like 8% maybe. That was pretty specific. I'll say under 5 actually is probably a better
you were throwing out a specific number there. Like, I wasn't going to argue it. It's not like you can quantify a difference between 8% and 5%.
Right. Well, it's like, Arif, do you think if you think of it fractionally, it's a little bit better? Do you think it's closer to 1 in 20 or like 1 in 17 or whatever 8% is? And it's like, oh, well, I guess I do think it's closer to 1 in 20. That was the thought process of me changing it from 8 to less than 5. But yeah, it doesn't matter. It's very unlikely.
Somewhere around 3.3 repeating percent.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty unlikely. They do obviously have a great offensive line. The Patriots have a lot of issues with their pass rush. But I think a lot of it's just going to be determined by what happens with the Eagles' ground game. The Patriots are 30th in DVOA against the run, which means that they give up a fair amount of big plays, but more importantly, they give up a lot of successful runs. The thing is, the Eagles have a pretty good run game, but they don't like to give Jay Ajayi the ball that much. Like, remember, even in the previous game the Eagles played in against some opponent, J.J. was going off, but he was getting less efficient over time. And that was the most carries he's had all year, 18. They don't give him the ball that much. He typically gets around 15 or fewer. So then they're going to go to like Corey Clement and LeGarrette Blount and Wendell Smallwood and, they probably have another running back I'm not aware of. And so that's going to be kind of determinative of, I think, the game. And so the Patriots are going to load up the box, force Nick Foles to throw. It won't necessarily work. I think the Eagles will still run the ball and probably do it effectively. But I think that means that they're going to limit their offensive potential just overall. And the Patriots have a Gronk.
It is hard to account for a Gronk.
Right.
Especially now that he has cleared he's officially cleared the concussion protocol.
Yeah. I put a lot of pride on the line for Gronk plus 850 to be the MVP. I think that's a really good bet. It's been a bit since we've had a non-quarterback offensive player, I think, be a game MVP. I misremembered. I thought James White was the game MVP last year, and it was Tom Brady. So
yeah, I think Von Miller is probably the last one.
Right. And then before that, it was like in Seattle was a defensive player. Maybe it was Bobby Wagner. And so those are defensive players. So like when's the last time we had like an offensive skill player or whatever? But I do think, Gronk could do it if he gets over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I think that they're going to focus on him. So, yeah, I think it is a mismatch in favor of the Patriots. I would argue that the Patriots line, which was plus 5.5, I think it's now 4.5. Because people have been spouting the statistic that the Patriots have, they've been in like 7 Super Bowls, right? And all of them have been within a touchdown. And only one of the victories has been by more than 5 points. It's the last one. I don't care about that. That's a sample size of like 7, and 3 of those samples come from like when the Patriots were a defensive team with a game manager, Tom Brady. Who cares? The Patriots are a better team. They've got a better game, or not a better team. I think talent for talent, the Eagles are better, but I think they've got a better coaching staff, and I think they've got a better coherence about them as a team, and more consistency as a team that'll allow them to take over. So yeah, I think we'll see. Zach Ertz is going to be important. The Patriots responding to the RPO, and Bill Belichick is like best friends with Nick Saban. I refuse to believe he does not have an answer to the RPO, but how they respond to the RPO, how they respond to Zach Ertz, that's all going to matter defensively, but there's a reason they're 4th in points allowed. And I don't think it's just those bend not break stuff. I think also a lot of it has to do with just how efficient they are at situational football. So, if they give up 9 yards on 1st and 10 and then don't give up any yards on 2nd and 1 and 3rd and 1, that's, a somewhat significant amount of yardage, but they forced a punt, right? Or something like that, right? Yeah, I think the Patriots defense is fine. It's not as good as the Philadelphia defense, person for person, but I think that they'll game plan better for what the Eagles can do offensively than what the Eagles can do game planning for what the Patriots can do offensively, especially because maybe it's not Gronk. Maybe it's like James White again, or it could be Deion Lewis this time. I think he's an interesting pick for the Patriots player that goes off. It could be Rex Burkhead, and that would make a ton of sense because in the last article I wrote about the Eagles matchup, they give up a ton of yards after the catch, which it would have been nice to use that information if you were the Vikings. It was out there, I'm just saying. But the Patriots are not only good at acquiring that kind of information, they're good at using it. And so Rex Burkhead's perfect for it. Danny Amendola's perfect for it. You could, challenge deep with Chris Hogan and Brandon Cooks. That's a little bit more difficult, but yeah, any Patriots player could just go off and you would just believe it, right? That's the problem with the Patriots. Dwayne Allen went off. Yeah, I guess. That's just how you interpret the Patriots. And when you've got that kind of versatility, I don't know. It doesn't matter how good Fletcher Cox is. It doesn't matter how good Brandon Graham is. They've been getting a lot of pressure. They've been getting a lot of sacks. The over/under on sacks in the game for both teams total is 4.5, and I actually took the under. That neither Foles nor Brady get sacked that much, and because I don't believe in the Patriots pass rush, even with blitzes, I think it's going to be a low sack game, and if it's a low sack game, I think the Patriots go off.
Yeah, if it's a low sack game and Brady has any amount of time back there, he's just going to pick them apart. Like that's just kind of how Brady ends up operating. If you're able to hit him and hit him often, then you're going to put yourself in a much better situation. By the way, in case you were curious, Santonio Holmes in 2009 was the last Super Bowl MVP that was not a quarterback or a defensive player.
Nearly a decade ago, actually, and in that game, it would have been Larry Fitzgerald. I think if they had won. That's wild.
Yeah, but definitely would have been Larry Fitzgerald that year. So yeah, it's funny just looking at the list briefly. You forget that Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl MVP only in 2013.
Kill me. That's ridiculous.
His eliteness got an MVP of the Super Bowl in 2013. Just
So the last offensive skill player was 2009. So that's 9 years ago. Oh boy.
Well, it's funny because it was Santonio Holmes. The year before that was Eli Manning, and then it was Peyton, and then it was Hines Ward. So, the Steelers just have a history of having their wide receivers be really good and make their quarterback look great. Sure,
yeah, it's a shot at Terry Bradshaw if I've ever heard one.
Well,
but I think didn't Tom Brady give his MVP truck over to James White anyway?
He did, yeah. We talked about it on the show once. Yeah. It was
and it creates tax problems.
Yeah, sorry if this puts you in a different tax bracket, but it doesn't really go with the Uggs. So
could have at least given the MVP to Malcolm Butler. Whatever.
Well, here we are. So the game is happening on Sunday. Where are you going to be watching it?
At my old house where the cable's still connected.
There you go.
Yeah.
I haven't decided where yet. We did win that stupid couple buckets of free beer and free chicken at the place we watched it at. When we won it, being the only people who stuck around after the game, we won a raffle. So we covered that we covered that last episode. So I may end up watching it there because it involves free food and free beer. I haven't decided exactly yet, but I have a feeling that may end up being the place that we just kind of meekly. It's one of those games where you just watch it through your phone. It's on the TV in front of you, but you're really just scrolling through Twitter at this point.
Right, exactly.
It'd be different if two different teams were playing, and especially after Justin Timberlake said "Go Pack, go" in the press conference today, I was like, really? You're from Tennessee, dude. Let's.
One of my favorite prop bets is Pink going to shout something about the Eagles before, during, or after the anthem, and I was like, during. I know that if you include before and after, you have to put during in the prop bet, but I'm just thinking that's the boldest shit ever.
That would be. I can only think of so many things that would just directly inspire Donald Trump to tweet, and I think that Pink saying go or making some comment about football during the national anthem.
That'd be incredible.
Yeah,
what if it was at the very end, and the home of the Eagles? That would be weird.
Why would you do it? It would make. It's hard enough to remember the actual lines themselves. I've sung the anthem before. It's annoying as hell. It's long. It's
got some stupid notes in it. Yeah.
It's got these weird harmonies we were trying to do, and I didn't like it. Not that I didn't like the anthem, I just didn't like the arrangement. Want to be clear there, but we didn't say some sports team in the middle of it because that would be absurd. If that were to happen, I would just assume that life has just become a Monty Python sketch. I can't.
Yeah, right. That would be the final. We've gotten a lot of clues, but I haven't fully accepted. Oh, in the home of the Eagles. Got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's
here we are.
Welcome to 2018, where nothing matters.
So yeah, that's my favorite prop bet. The favorite prop bet that I took was whether or not Justin Timberlake would cover a Prince song, which that one seems now that I've seen it, that one seems a given.
Yeah, and he has announced that NSYNC will not be reuniting on the stage, so that's bad for
that is a good place to put a not the forum argument. Like, okay, yeah, you could say not
too
the
bad
forum
for Joey
for
Fatone
players protesting, whatever. But this is definitely not the forum to reunite NSYNC. Please have some decor.
Joey Fatone is gonna have to go back to working at IKEA for the rest of his Sunday shift. He is not able to get time off in order to get to Minneapolis in order to sing with the rest of
He
NSYNC.
talked to his boss. It wasn't happening.
We need somebody to make these. We need somebody to make these meatballs.
NSYNC only for Joey Fatone to steal the show and promote My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2. Like, that sounds perfect.
Yes. That is exactly what needs to be happening. I'd ask score prediction, but the most of the people who have mentioned about score, or like mentioned score predictions, have included an asteroid in it. So I don't know. I have a feeling that the Eagles will lose. I get the feeling this will likely be a 10 to 14 point loss. 24-10, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds good. I suppose I have to give a different score. 28-14.
Yes. These are the squares you want to pick at the bar. Because I was so right throughout the entirety of the playoffs, getting like every matchup wrong. So in our preview episode, so why the hell not take my advice on this?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
you're due, right?
I probably, or in my case, the whole being due was referring to winning this Super Bowl party, quote unquote, free beer and wings by being the only Vikings fans who stuck around after everyone left in the third quarter. Let's hit the mailbag, shall we? Nick Olson says, any preliminary thoughts on what our free agency and draft strategy should be?
I think that the Vikings would be wise to trade down to the top of the second round with a first round pick, because I think a number of guards that are interesting will be available. I obviously prefer Isaiah Wynn over Will Hernandez. Anyone who's heard anything about my Senior Bowl takes knows that, but I like both of them a lot. So if they end up with one, that's great. Billy Price also is a potential option. So they could grab a guard at the top of the second instead of the bottom of the first. They need to acquire more picks. That's really important because, Luke and I were talking, during the season, like what are the needs for the Vikings? It's very difficult to figure out. They seem like a very complete-ish team. And now that we've gotten to the end of the season, and we kind of figured it out before the season had ended. There's actually a lot of things that the Vikings need to do that they wouldn't be able to completely do in the draft. So unless they trade down and get more picks, I think they need more competition at the slot cornerback spot. I don't think anyone really disagrees. You could do that with a fourth or fifth round pick. I think that they need a defensive tackle. They need a guard. They need another guard. That's a thing that people I don't think are considering all that much. Like, it's not just that you have to replace a potentially retiring Joe Berger. I think you have to replace Nick Easton too. So, two guards, a defensive tackle, a slot cornerback. You need someone to replace Jerick McKinnon because it's nice to have that multi-capable offense and pass-catching back that can relieve Dalvin Cook. And it sounds like Jerick McKinnon's not coming back. So that kind of really expands the thing. And I mentioned that I'd prefer to have some sort of mid-round quarterback insurance. The Vikings draft an athletic defensive end every year, often in the third or fourth round, not always. That's way more than the 5 picks they have. And they have 2 compensatory picks in the 6th, and they always get an athletic linebacker to play special teams for them. So now you've kind of really filled up the plate with what you expect or want the Vikings to do. They could sign another guard in free agency. There's a couple available. Senio Calamete, I think is how you pronounce his name, is one. Zach Fulton is another. Andrew Norwell is another. They're all 27 or 26, so they'd be kind of interesting to sign. There's a couple of cornerbacks. Aaron Colvin from the Jaguars is one. And so some of these positions I mentioned probably do have to be kind of resolved through free agency. But there are also kind of things that some of them you kind of have to do through the draft, like the edge rusher thing. You kind of have to do through the draft. I think one of your 2 offensive linemen probably should come from the draft. I would be pleasantly surprised if they signed Sheldon Richardson right at that defensive tackle spot. But I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. And I think one of the things to consider with the $57 million cap space that the Vikings have, hey, if they get Teddy and like a cheap veteran quarterback and they only cost like $6 million and Teddy costs, let's say $8 million or whatever, it's like 14 to 16 million. And you've got like some 40 million left. That sounds like a lot of money, and it is obviously, but the Vikings want to front load their deals for like 5 different players. Eric Hendricks, Anthony Barr, Trey Waynes, God, there's 2. I always forget like which. I like name a different 3 every time. There's like 5 guys that they want to re-sign long term, and then that's going to cost a lot of money. If you can front load that, that'd be better. So, I think the strategy in free agency is to be a little bit more cautious, which the Vikings are frustratingly masterful at. And find ways to acquire more draft picks, and maybe that means like trading a guy. I don't know. I don't know who I would trade. Maybe Laquan Treadwell. He's probably not going to get you a 3rd round pick or anything, but
I'm sure we can find somebody that, though the Browns seem to be constantly trying to start themselves on fire. Maybe we can trade him and a pick for Josh Gordon and just.
That seems likely. Yeah. Okay.
Let's just go down that path for a bit. Let's see if we can. Yeah, we can sweeten up the deal. I mean, the Browns clearly have no desire to win.
Right. And speaking of Laquan Treadwell, you need to draft him, but the version of him that's good.
The version of him that catches balls and gets open and doesn't get injured.
Right. The Vikings have essentially one big-bodied red zone threat. It's Kyle Rudolph, who some years is pretty capable in that role, and some years seems to disappear. And it'd be nice to have 2 versions of that, and Laquan Treadwell. Now that's another one you could get in free agency, but more likely to draft, and so that's difficult too. There's a couple of strategies to go about doing this, and I've kind of isolated a bunch of free agents that I think are kind of interesting. I've focused on guys that are 26 or 27 at the end of next year's league year, because the Vikings tend to sign younger guys. Linval Joseph, for example, was signed at like 25 years old, just a phenomenal deal. That's kind of, I think, the overall strategy. Trade down out of the first. Make sure that your first 2 picks are probably an offensive guard and a defensive tackle, unless like some insane value like Dalvin Cook presents itself. There's a lot of areas to improve.
Josh Dugan asks, why are opinions on Cousins so varied across the board? On Twitter alone, I've seen takes ranging from he's below average to sign him to a long-term deal because he will lead us to the promised land. What gives?
He is statistically very appealing. His I think first year as a starter, he put up some like really ridiculously good numbers. And mind you, he was like throwing to Jamison Crowder, Deshaun Jackson, healthy Jordan Reed, Pierre Garçon, like the best version of his core. And I think his core is pretty good. He's got a really good supporting cast. And that complicates things too, right? So his numbers are good. As a 4th round pick, I think he was a 4th round pick, competing with, RG3, there were like reasons for people to kind of dig in their heels. I dug in my heels. I'm still actually kind of skeptical, and I'm wondering how much of that has to do with the residual, belief that RG3 was a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins at the time. I think that plays a role. I think the fact that Cousins didn't come on until late, which is where the "you like that" comes from. I think that plays a role. There's a lot. The numbers really like him. A lot of film guys do like him. A lot of film guys don't. There's a lot of preconceived stuff around him where he hasn't a 3rd round pick like Russell Wilson. He had to light the league on fire for 3 straight years before people were like, oh yeah, that guy's pretty good. And Kirk Cousins hasn't been lighting the league on fire. He's been statistically above average. I think that all plays a role in the general disdain that people have for Washington. I think it may also play a role. But I'm not super excited about him. So maybe I'm not the person to ask.
And let's just be honest, somebody's going to blame RG3 for all of this, according to him.
Yeah, he says. So
he got roasted on Twitter for that.
Well, it's the thing is I don't there was a bunch of stuff people said about RG3 that I thought wasn't true and unfair and potentially problematic, right? And I think that at the time it was not true about how selfish he was and self-absorbed and churlish or whatever you want to say.
And being able to blame the ownership as opposed to blaming the player.
Right. And then I think in my head, maybe this isn't true, maybe he was like this the whole time, but in my head, he like read all the stuff people said about him and decided it was true. Because he's acting like the way people described him when he was like a second-year player in the NFL. And it's like, yeah, someone's going to make this about me. And it's like, the only person that made it about you was you. So chill.
I think at some point it ended up proving that both versions of the story were right. That he was that he was the player and that ownership was that bad. Like somehow it turns out both versions of the story were completely accurate. Who knew?
Right.
Evan T. Creed asks on Twitter, I was surprised at CJ Ham's very low PFF score for the season. He seemed to have some impressive clutch plays. Do you think this was more how we schemed him in as a fullback, a bit non-traditionally, or do we need to look for an upgrade here?
I don't know. Like, people really praised Zach Line for a couple of years while I was fairly critical of him, and I was a huge fan of him as an undrafted free agent, and I just thought he never like panned out as an interesting, very good blocker. I don't have the same feeling about CJ Ham. I guess this is something I'm going to have to dig in deeper, but like Line was a very poor blocker. Ham, it seems like, has been performing his job when he's been a runner. And it really feels like he's broken off some pretty big good runs, and I don't remember any significant pass protection failures from him. So nothing stands out to me as a reason as to why he would have a poor PFF grade. Normally I could answer these, like I can tell you why Pat Elflein has like a ridiculously low PFF grade, despite the fact that he's like very obviously crucial to the run game. But I don't have an answer for you with regards to CJ Ham.
I think we just need to keep him in for the ham package. It's important.
Ham package.
Alex Goebel. This is an important and oddly topical question. Has the recent influx of life into Mall of America caused the entire building to become sentient? I refuse to believe these responses from the official Twitter account are generated by something human. All of the college interns in all of these brands are just name searching right now. They are searching hard.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird, especially when it's like the Mall of America, like their company, the product that they sell is space in the Mall of America. Like that's what they do. So it's not even like they have a product that like people interact with. They can be like, oh yeah, Moon Pie is interacting with us on Twitter. I'll buy some Moon Pies. Like it's like, okay, fine. That's weird, but okay. It's like an object I can hold it.
Not every brand needs to have the smart and funny Twitter account. Like Wendy's, Wendy's, while having an amazing Twitter account, has ruined Twitter accounts for corporate accounts now, because now every like corporate account on Twitter has to be that funny or that clever. Like I forget if it was Surly. It must have been Surly that asked if you were still the #1 fan for James Madison or something like that. Like, somebody did a deep dive on that.
That was great. Honestly, they get a pass. That's phenomenal. But yeah. And also, I was responding to an article that was published at Surly that was really good. I was like, oh, you wrote that. That's better than what we write. Like I'm upset. We're football writers. It's a better football article. Okay, bye. That's what I was like. And so like the response was like, thanks. Good to hear that, Arif, the #1 James Madison Dukes fan. I was like, wow.
Either you're familiar with the work or you did a very good Google search and decided that was going to be the one thing that you pop out of this.
Which it was like that's fantastic.
Yeah.
The Mall of America Twitter account being like snarky was like weird because they were still like wrong.
Why don't you love us, Arif?
Yeah, or it was like, because like, a guy that we had on the show, Marxist Panther, was like, what do you mean you caved? Because I tweeted out, Jesus Christ, I caved in the picture of the Mall of America. Yeah. And I was like, it's caving because I was complaining about how much the mall sucks. And then the next day I'm at the Mall of America. And
you're like
the Mall
those
of America
people.
Tweeted back.
You're like those people who get visitors from out of town and be like, so what do you want to do? We've got like the Walker, we've got like the Statue Gardens, we got downtown is bustling, there's real stuff going on. What do you want to do? We want to go to MOA, and you go, oh God, why? And then you get dragged to it. Like
that's what it was essentially. So I'm like, yeah, so I'm here now, and the Mall of America tweeted at me. It's like, do you still think it sucks? And then they did like the thinking face emoji, and I'm like, yes. What? I'm not here because you suddenly offered a good product. Like, what? This place still sucks. There's still 6.5 lid stores. Yeah, right. I can't find my ice scraper, but there's 6 hat stores. What is this? Like, it's the same store 6 times. You only have 4 sides. Like, please. And so, I tweeted the what the fuck gif back at them. I think it's the lead singer of Blink-182 saying that. Yeah. That gif. Who, by the way, he's a conspiracy theorist about aliens. Fascinating stuff.
But at least we're fairly certain he's alive as opposed to Avril Lavigne.
Right, yeah, yeah. No, he is exposing the truth, whereas Avril Lavigne is dead, and so whoever's replaced her is hiding the truth.
Yes.
It's a crucial difference. And they were like, yeah, we're always watching. It was something weird. It wasn't like as dystopian as we're always watching, but it was like something weird. And I was like, please improve your mall experience. Like, I was like, get out of here. You have a shitty mall. Well, and they're like, we're doing our best. Thumbs up. And I was like, that's okay.
Well, anonymous GM on Twitter asks, what are Arif's favorite MOA stores?
Barnes and Noble, because they're quiet inside and I'm a nerd, and they've got a little coffee shop that you can work at. It's nice. Go there.
God, MOA has changed over so many times. Every time I end up because I tend to stay in the Bloomington-ish area just as a center of operations whenever I come through, either Bloomington or Roseville, also because I'm just so familiar with both of those 2 areas. But I've been to MOA fairly recently. Yeah, like last year I was there, and just when I need to not be here anymore.
And it's like way different than it was 2 years ago, and I'm still like, I gotta leave.
Be like, yeah, I actually don't know if I have a favorite MOA. Despite the fact that there's a bunch of Packers like stuff in it, Rybecki actually has some really good cheese in it. So there's that. But I wouldn't call it. Wouldn't call it my favorite store, but yeah.
I haven't been inside the Art of Shaving store, but I suspect I would like it. So there's that.
I actually had to go into Build-A-Bear last time I was there, I think.
Which one? There's 2.
Oh God, this was main floor? Unless there's 2 on the main floor now.
There might be 2 on the main. I know there's 2, which that pisses me off too.
Well, considering
it's arbitrarily large.
Yeah, that was a miserable experience. Doing Build-A-Bear on a Saturday afternoon was right up there with going to IKEA on a Saturday afternoon.
With the like arrows on the floor, you had to be like carted through like cattle. Like,
no, it sucked. Yeah, there's a line. There's a very complicated line. And there's like ways of constantly trying to upsell you on a 2, and it's just...
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
Like, the kid loved it. Loved the final product. He was not with me because there's no way that you could have paid me to do that. But... like, I love my son. I don't love him enough to sit in line with him at Build-A-Bear.
Yeah,
there is a line, and that is the line. That's just not something I'm willing to cross. But he loved it and everything. But still, one of the more miserable experiences of my adult life was sitting in that line, just going, "Oh, for the love of God, just finish stuffing the bear ahead of us so we can go through." So, yeah, let's get away from James's PTSD for a moment, and we have a question from Kyle Slaby, who asks, pick only one for each: franchise, sign long term, and let walk/trade. It's a variation of the F, Marry, Kill. Barr, Kendricks, and Diggs.
First of all, props. Those are perfect analogs to F, Marry, Kill. Second, dude, not fair. That sucks.
This is hard.
Man, I guess it really depends on like what it means to F, right? Like, so franchising, do you get to sign them long term afterwards? Like, I don't know. Because in F, Marry, Kill, presumably you're like monogamous, and so the person you marry is the person you marry. But
I think in the case of franchise, this is as about as short term as you're going to get. So you'd be looking at 1 to 2 years
you just
max.
get the one. Yeah, 1 year, maybe 2 if you're willing to heavily overpay. Okay, so out of the 3 of them, Kendrick's is by far the most consistent, but he's also not the most inherently talented. Like Anthony Barr's had a better year than either of them. In 2015, in 2015 he had a better year. His freak athleticism, I would argue, is a better catalyst for the type of defense that they run that allows them to shut down those screens. But Kendricks has just been a better linebacker over the course of like 3 years. This is tough. And then Diggs, shit, right? Like, I don't know. This is tough. I guess I would sign Kendricks to a long-term deal. I think that's the one. Capital T, capital O. Because I think the way he holds down the defense, even though Barr is kind of like physically like a better fit for the style of defense they run right now, is just so critical. So then I guess I franchise Diggs and let Barr walk, and then you get a 3rd-round compensatory pick out of it because he's going to get a friggin' great deal in free agency. That hurts so much.
But you could easily go the route of letting Kendricks go, short-term deal for Diggs and long-term for Barr.
Yeah, I think there's a totally valid philosophy that does that because of the centrality of Barr's physical skill set to the style of defense that they run. Like, it's something Kendricks can't do.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. I think franchising Barr makes sense because, you never know when he's going to hit a peak or a trough. And so hopefully you catch, the right time.
And we're on an upswing for Barr right now.
Right. So it totally makes sense to franchise him too. So yeah, that one's tough for me.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's rough. Final question is from Don from Ohio, who asks, now that Dusty O'Connell has left to start his own underground public assistance gaming league, how will you and Arif select the next co-host?
Whoever emerges victorious in the public assistance gaming league.
Yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Right.
I did send that to Dusty earlier today, and Dusty thoroughly enjoyed that. No plans have been solidified as far as co-host stuff goes. Right now, we're going to operate under the 2, which is actually a good transition into what we're going to talk about in a sec here for shows moving forward, because we are entering the postseason. We are entering the time where we would talk about the combine and all of the wonderful things involving the draft. So Vikings news will be hard to come by. We will still be coming in when it is appropriate. We will likely not be doing one show a week coming soon, but we will be kind of slowing it down a bit. But there are no plans to bring in Paul Allen or anybody like that, so, as we discussed at the beginning of the show. But
right, had to turn him down.
Yeah,
right,
had to turn him down. Just don't add him. That's not fair. It's not nice.
It's not fair.
But, yeah, definitely not fair. Or legal, but yes, there's nothing in place. But right now we are very happy with the situation that we have with the 2 of us. So we will see what happens with the coming year. But all of that said, we are still enjoying the show. We hope you are still enjoying the show. And if you have enjoyed it and would like to throw us a couple of bucks and help keep the lights on and keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay, you can do so at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate to the show there. Arif, do you have anything to plug before we are off?
Obviously I still have my piece on stuff to do in Minneapolis that is not the MOA or downtown, that I think is cool. It's got, music and places to eat and stuff like that. So that's over its own coverage. And then the next piece I'm writing, I already kind of mentioned it, was about the protest that's going to happen. People were really receptive to my sports and politics piece. This is more journalistic than it is opinion, but it's obviously kind of in the same realm. So that's what I'm plugging.
Part of me really wants to take off after work tomorrow and head down to Minneapolis. I've got a couple friends that live down there that would be willing to set me up on a couch, but part of me really wants to take a look and just, embrace the whole Minneapolis Super Bowl thing. But part of me wonders if I'll even be able to make it into the city. There's a million ways in, but most of them are going to be particularly difficult to get around in. So I'm debating, but I have a feeling I'm going to end up with a bunch of free beer and wings in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, and I was in the state for the Super Bowl, so.
To be able to tell that story to your grandkids.
Yeah. That's, why don't we just watch why don't we just shoot out an extra episode of Norse Code where we just watch the Super Bowl that happened in the Metrodome? We'll just do the running commentary of that, including the halftime show. I forget if that was Gloria Estefan or if that was Michael Jackson, but that's how we're going to spend our Super Bowl Saturday. It'll be fine. So that is going to be it for this show. Again, if you've enjoyed it, please feel free to donate or share a link, tweet us out. Please have fun with it. We enjoy the show. We hope you do too. We will be back next week, hopefully, where we will discuss the offensive coordinator and what that means for us moving forward. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and demand excellence. Demand Norse Code. And we will hopefully see you next week.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pogachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, NorseCodePodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to NorseCodePodcast@gmail.com. And on behalf of the entire Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.